I'm back on.
No, I will say that with Mike and Druba, we are I am among friends, but no, I'll save it for the girls.
All right.
Okay. Well, we'll just have to stay on afterwards or go out. All right. Well, it's I feel like, because every time I start a meeting, I hear Phil in the back of my head going, "Now we're meeting after 7 o'clock. We're going to." So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Suze Craighead. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters. I really owe this to Cynthia McLean, who is the vice president, and to Jake, who's voter services and also our treasurer, for putting this all together. And thank you to all of the panelists for participating and other people for listening. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia.
Well, thank you, Suze. Good evening, everyone. I am Cynthia McLean, the Vice President of the League of Women Voters here in Framingham. Welcome to our Women's History Month celebration. Tonight, we have a distinguished panel of women who have contributed to the growth of our city and our community. We could not let this month end without honoring them. So we honor each and every one of you here tonight. They all have a unique perspective as women, mothers, wives, aunties, etc. And in spite of their busy schedules, they have agreed to share some time with us. So tonight's format, I'm going to introduce our guests, and then I will ask a question, which each of them will answer. We are going to do the introductions in alphabetical order, because everyone on the call tonight, on the Zoom tonight, everyone is equally important. So here is the first question, and it's going to Jessica Barnhill. We know that women have fought hard to earn a place as part of our community and government, and it has greatly benefited society, even the world. What is the lesson from history for today's modern woman?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Jessica Barnhill here. So women in history, I think really for me, it's been believing in ourselves and having the confidence to use my voice. I bought my house in 2010 and lived in Framingham most of my whole life. And for me, it was stepping up into a role where I knew that we needed representation, and looking at my resume and the skills and the experience and the knowledge that I had, I always thought that I could put those to use. And now, as a mom of a 5-year-old, I think that I try to do my best and advocate for the students of the South Side who can't advocate for themselves. And one of the big reasons I got into this is because that there were glaring inequities in our community. And one of them being, we do not have a South Side school, and our students' educational experience in the South Side is very different than that of their North Side peers. And it was just this glaring inequity. Why is nobody speaking up? Why is nothing being done about this? And really, one of the things that has helped me is that I wasn't alone in that, and that the work that I'm continuing to do is because those who have come before me have also used their voice. And as women, I really feel that we are in this together, and I support women supporting other women. When you win, I win. And that's kind of the philosophy that I have with, people that should have the support. I think of recent campaign elections, and it really kind of rings true to think that other women's success is also a success, and seeing them as champions for the same cause rather than competition, and thinking of how can we keep rising. And when I say we, I mean women in this world, because we have historically had a more difficult road than our male counterparts, if you will. So thank you so much for the question. It's really, I think Priscilla said it best. I'm really excited to be here and for all the work that you continue to do.
Thank you. Tracy, Councilwoman Tracy Bryant.
Unmute. Tracy.
I was remuted. I unmuted. Okay, now I'm unmuted again. I just wanted to thank you, Cynthia. Thank you all. And as Priscilla said, yes, I'm excited. I think we all are excited. We can breathe. But to answer the question, I think that what the lesson for women is: do not define yourselves. Do not let society define you. We are needed. We bring a unique history and perspective. And even within women, there's a multiplicity of stories, experiences, and just so much thoughts, our individuals, our collective. We have earned a seat at the table. We should have had it from the beginning, but we were busy doing many things, and then we had to fight for it. The thing about Women's History Month that makes me so proud is every time I look at the pictures of the women that came before us. Indeed, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And I would say to the lesson for women now is, please make time to give your input, because it is invaluable. And for society to be the best it can be, the women's perspective is needed. Otherwise, we're always going to be a little less than what we could be as a society.
Thank you. City Councilwoman Janet Lombruno.
Hello. I have to say, Scout ran out of the room barking, so I didn't hear the end of the question, but I think I'm getting I heard the beginning part of it, but what I'm kind of gathering from the other answers from my fellow panel here, I think that, first of all, thank you for having us here. I think this is great. I think it's a great way to honor women's history. I've been blessed to have strong women in my life. And my mother, starting with her, she really showed me, from a very young age, with a sister that was disabled, growing up with a big family with kids, and how to kind of make it all work. And my mother was on the library board when she was her first position she was elected to. And I remember her serving with George King. He was the youngest. And I remember, her being one of the women. And I thought, gee, I never thought women couldn't run for things. And I thought it was great. And then here we are, I don't even know how many years later. And I see my mother still, her strength, really. She was a teacher, and I learned a lot by example of how, she set kind of the tone. So I think that, as like Tracy said, a seat at the table, I think that, we've earned it. I think that, and to also say on piggyback on Jessica, it's, your challenges that, are what drives you to serve, things you see in your neighborhoods. We all got involved because of something that happened, and like myself, I had the privilege of, my father was very involved. He was on the Democratic Town Committee. He was the chair of the conservation, and he was the campaign manager for the very first female selectmen elected. And I remember I was on the front page of the paper. I was like only 14, and it was really cool. But again, I never thought anything, I didn't know that we were making history then. So it's just kind of something that I've had the privilege of being around and growing up in Framingham, seeing a lot of strong women. So I'm hoping that touched on what your whole question was. And I apologize if I was a little out of the parameters of what the actual question was. So thank you.
You are welcome, Janet. Thank you. To City Councilwoman Christine Long.
Thank you. So just to sort of bounce off everybody's responses here, the reason I got involved with politics is because women do it better, number one. Number two, I actually went to school for political science and got my degree in political science and work in the construction industry. as a contractor. And as a result of that, I wasn't getting a lot of ability to exercise what I knew about politics and what I really had passion about other than construction. So being involved in town government, city government, being on different boards, and also just being in construction, where at the time that I started in construction back in the 80s, late 70s, women really weren't playing a big role as contractors on commercial sites. So I think that you always have to have enough faith and trust in yourself that you can do what you want to do, or as long as you you have to have confidence in yourself. So if you don't try, you're not going to succeed. And the only thing you can do is fail, get up and try again. So for me, I've liked to have a lot of change, a lot of diversity, a lot of experiences with a lot of different disciplines. So this has been a great experience for me. And Dolly Parton's one of my heroes, Susan Estrich. There's so many women that have done so much good for the rest of us, to inspire us, to encourage us to be involved. As what's his name, Dave Hutchinson used to say, get involved in your town government, participate, because we have a different perspective. Women have children, women bear the children, women go to work, take care of their kids, have grandchildren, take care of their house, while the men, they may be great at doing their work, and maybe some of them are better providers as far as financial, but women can do it just as good, if not better, because we have to do multitasking all day long as females. Plus our bodies have different challenges. So for me, I think that participating in government is essential, and to give your constituents a voice, and, in general. So I don't know if that really answers your question either, because the question got lost about 10.
No, you did. You did.
But I think that, I encourage women to go out, get involved, put your name in a ballot and run for office, because you're never going to succeed if you don't at least try. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
School committee member Jennifer Mosher. Mosha. There you go.
Hello. So as my colleagues will tell you on the school committee, I ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions because I want to know the why. And I think if we don't know the why, we really can't do our job. And being in this position, I have the means to ask the appropriate people the why. Do I get involved in too many questions? Perhaps I do. Sometimes I get a little carried away, but I don't care. I don't care, because if I don't understand the whole picture, and if it doesn't make sense to me, chances are there's our constituents who don't understand it either. So I'm here for them also. And I think that's pretty important. And what history has taught us is anything a man can do, we can do. And why can't we prove that? And I think we prove that every day by this panel of strong women who do that every day. And we're going to continue to do it, because we're not done. The work is never done.
Thank you. School committee member Valerie Ottaviani. She's not here. Okay. Let's move on to our youngest elected official here in Framingham, library trustee Isabella Petroni.
Thank you for having me here. I would say, for my quotes, my kind of thing to say, it's learning from history and learning about the women who's coming before it, because you can find some amazing things about our foremothers who've done incredible work. One thing that Teresa talked about is the multitude of experiences that women have. And as well as someone who's a woman, someone who is queer, and navigating both of those spaces, I think finding the histories and experiences and finding out more than sometimes what conventional history taught us about women and their amazing things that they have done. Like we learned in Women's History Month, we learned kind of our standard few women we talk about. But it's important that we talk about the women who've inspired us in our hometowns, as Janet Lee and Bruno talked about. It's important to talk about the women who have made and broken some rules or under the radar. Both Alice Paul and Lucy Burns, both members of the National Women's Party, who helped to found suffragettes movements and helped to get the 19th Amendment passed, are both believed to be historians, to be both women and advocating for queer rights even as early as the 1920s, when it was still considered illegal. But those kind of historical stories are really important, because sometimes I think being young, sometimes being queer, and being a woman all at once, it's incredible if you look back in history and find that there are people who are just like you and can inspire the stories that are just like yours. So I think I encourage people to go back and look at that, because I think sometimes we think of history as the victory teller and we learn about the typical white men in history. But if you dig further and that's what curriculum teaches you, you can find some incredible books. You're going to find some incredible women talking about some incredible people that you never would have known if you didn't dig into it, and hopefully find some inspiration to continue their work on to this day.
Thank you. Framingham Source Publisher, Editor-in-Chief, Susan Petroni.
Good evening. I just want to start out with that women's voices matter. And I think that's the key thing I want to get across. And I've said this to my daughter, and I'm very proud of her tonight. But that if you feel like your voice isn't being heard, then you need to speak up. It's not enough to just have a seat at the table. You need to be heard at the table. And I think it's important for women to speak up. And when they see things that are wrong, to protest, to speak up more, to start petitions, to tell their stories. And one of the things that I really enjoy being a journalist is telling all of women's stories.
Thank you. State Representative Priscilla Souza.
It is, first of all, it's amazing to be in this panel of women who are helping us run the city, who are, I'd say running the city, but I don't want to offend the male counselors and our mayor, but girls who are running stuff. So, but I'm incredibly honored to be here and to understand that we stand on the shoulders of the women that came before us. I believe it was library trustee member Isabella Petroni who just mentioned that spaces that were previously occupied by men, and a lot of times being the first. I mean, we have the first vice chair of the Framingham City Council here, who is a woman, and all these spaces. And I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge, to identify it, but also to take it further, to understand that we have a responsibility to the women that show up after us. And we've, Susan was talking about occupying these spaces and showing up. I go out of my way to talk to women, especially women who are considering running for office, whether in Framingham and otherwise, and let them know it is a little scary. Sometimes you're going to go when your voice is trembling, but go anyway. If you've got something to say, and if you feel prepared, chances are you're probably more prepared than a lot of people who are in that room in there. So it's incredibly important to empower each other, lift each other up, kind of like get up on that next step and pull the next person ahead. In the very near recent past, unfortunately, I was in a situation where I was essentially pitted against another woman very publicly. And it was done as a joke, but also understanding that it's our responsibility to interrupt these microaggressions and interrupt casual misogyny. And knowing that it is going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And sometimes, I got called arrogant, I got called everything, but if we don't do it, we are making it harder for the generations that come behind us. And we're getting to a point where 50 years later, we're still having the same conversations. So we've made a tremendous amount of work. It's understanding, it's recognizing that women have come and paved the way for us, but we need to continue paving.
Thank you. And on that note, the next question is, was there a woman who has inspired you to become involved with your community? Who was it and how? I would like to say, before going to our first guest to answer this question, the woman who inspired me was my mother. Janet mentioned her mother. I believe my mother's courage, my mother's ambition, not being afraid to speak up, that she was my inspiration. And she was the one who gave me the courage to not be afraid of the unknown, and not be afraid to fail, and not be afraid to speak up. So, school committee member Jessica Barnell, who was the woman who inspired you to become involved with your community, and how?
Well, there's only one person that really comes to mind, and I'm not stealing your answer, but it's my mom. It's my mom. My mom had a tough life. You know, she lived in the mustard field. She grew up with her 4 other siblings, with a single mom. They lived in on Anzio Road, right by the courthouse. And she worked at a very young age. She got her first car. She put herself through school. She worked while my dad went to medical school. And she was the caretaker, the primary caretaker. I'm like, sorry, it's bringing tears to my eyes just to think about how strong she was and how much she always gave to others, that it wasn't about her. It was never about her. It was always about what she could do for other people. And just like, she really empowered me to kind of believe in myself, especially when maybe I didn't. Yeah, her memory lives on. And I think that seeing her as such a positive, strong role model helps me have the courage and have the confidence to want to help my community. You know, and now I do it, and I hope she's, you know, smiling down and proud of me. So
Wow,
sorry
Jessica.
if I get all teary-eyed in your forum, but I think there's no other way that question could be answered for me. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. We honor your mother. Our next guest, City Councilwoman Tracy Bryant. Who inspired you?
So many. My mother, it was just, she just was. She is a very strong woman. She will not take low for anybody. She taught us to be strong. She would come out and advocate, but mainly she used her strength to help people, to serve. But you know, she always did that. But I come from a long line of women who defined their service and also refused to be defined by outside people. My mother's grandmother, so my great-grandmother, she was the first midwife in the county for Black people in the county in Virginia. And my grandmother was a very strong woman also, and she had 4 daughters and 2 sons. So I was raised around a lot of women, different personalities, but there was that same strength. Everyone didn't have strength the same way, but my mother probably is obviously, she'd love to hear that because we also argue quite a bit, not too bad, but disagree on things. But her example alone, she showed that you can always overcome, you know, no matter what the circumstances. Her first marriage to my natural father did not work out. She had to leave us with my grandparents, come up to Massachusetts to work and make a life. And she was the dominant force in the household. So my mother and, you know, just countless of other women who got involved, helped other people, and they did not allow us not to also contribute.
Thank you for sharing. City Councilwoman and Vice Chair Janet Lombruno.
I'm gonna not try to cry. Jessica, that was just amazing. And like your mom is so proud. Like that just really set me off. And Tracy, too, your comments. You know, I mean, I think that there are a lot of women, but, you know, I start with my grandmother who raised my mother and 3 daughters, you know, all college grads back then. You know, they didn't go to college, and, you know, they were, you know, trail makers back then, and trailblazers, whatnot. And, you know, it just carried on to my mother. And, you know, seeing my mother, with all the things that she did, you know, having a sick child, you know, being in and out of the hospital, in and out of the hospital, in and out, operation after operation after operation. And we were all brought in, you know, all 4 kids would be, you know, so we all like grew up in hospital vending machines, and we just kind of thought that was normal. And she just kind of, you know, it was just something that we did. And, you know, she had the strength, and I'll tell you, I don't know how she did it, because, you know, it's very hard to deal with, you know, especially back in the days where they had no resources for the disabled. And that's why Karen ended up starting the Disability Commission, because they didn't have it back then. So my mother really instilled a lot in my sister. And I don't think my mother thinks she's as strong as she is. God willing, we still have her. And she, you know, I don't think she realizes really how strong she is, really, how strong she is, because what she's done is set me in motion with things, whether it was, you know, trying out for Little League and they didn't let girls play. And, you know, instead of my mother saying, well, you better come home, she's like, well, just try out anyway. So I didn't know I was going to be the first girl that, you know, that was allowed to play. I mean, it just happened to be that way. And, you know, my mother could have said, oh, come on home, you know, it's the boys. And so there were a lot of things like that. And then when my mother was teaching, she was a teacher and she couldn't teach because of my sister being sick so much. She would actually sub in her schools. So she got to be at the schools if she ever needed to, you know, be needed, but she, so she still got to teach. And again, it was something that, you know, she just wanted to do. And I think I didn't really think about it till I got older. And as I have my own kids, and you look and you see the life lessons that your parents teach you and your especially strong moms, I think we carry it and not even really realizing it. So, but so that's my mom is the one, and you know,
Yes.
I'm not going to cry.
It's okay. Happy tears.
Yeah.
Thank you. Moving on to City Councilwoman Christine Long.
Thank you. So I guess it's going to be boring, but my mom was my inspiration, and actually my paternal grandmother, who owned her own business and took care of my disabled grandfather. So I got to watch that and how she would go to work all the time and still take care of my grandfather. And my mother ran my dad's business. She actually had to drop out of school in high school when she was young to take care of her sisters and brothers and help with her mother. And this goes back to the original Great Depression, where COVID-19, actually my grandfather died from that, both of them, my original grandfather. So I'd have to say my mother, being brilliant regardless of her higher education that she never was able to enjoy, stressed the five of us kids to make sure we got educated, that we went to college, that we specialized in. She always says, you're going to get your business degree no matter what, which I did get my business degree on top of my political science degree. But just watching her run the household, my dad's successful business as a contractor. We did not grow up in Framingham. We grew up in Wellesley. So we always, my mother was a seamstress too. So she, between being a seamstress, she was a, what do you call it? She did cake decorating. So between seamstress, cake decorating, she went to bridge club. So she taught me how to play bridge, and she taught me to be independent and never depend on a man or anybody else to take care of myself, to make sure that whatever I did in my life, that I was able to care for myself. And if I have kids, make sure I teach my kids to be very strong and independent. So I guess I would have to say, aside from the fact that I love Dolly Parton, because what she did for her hometown of Sevierville, she brought back so much to what she couldn't get originally, because that was one of the poorest towns in Tennessee. And she was able to make a lot of money and bring that Dolly World back to them to be able to provide jobs and bring in money. So the way I look at it, if she can do it, all of us can do it. So you just got to want to do it and have the strength and courage to go and seek whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. So there's a lot of women out there that inspire me, but I would have to say my mother being at the top of the list, my grandmothers, both of them, and Dolly Parton. So
Thank you. School committee member Jennifer Mosher. Did I have it? Say it right?
No, there's no R. There's no R in the end, but I don't correct people. It's okay.
I apologize.
It's okay. So what inspired me was my three daughters. I have three daughters that are very different, but I think it's very important for me to show them that if you have a mouth, use it. Um, get up every day, advocate for yourself, advocate for what you think is right. Even if you think it's wrong, still can make a point, but you can also admit when you're wrong. And your background doesn't define who you are. Your upbringing doesn't define who you are. It makes you stronger. And it's how you choose to take the skills that you've learned from your life experiences and you use it to make change.
Thank you. Isabella Petroni?
So the person who inspired me is in the room or on Zoom tonight. That'd be my own mother. And I guess I'll start initially that not only did she inspire me get into politics, but I think she inspired me to do whatever I wanted to do before I wanted to go into mostly focusing on policy and law, which I'm studying. I originally wanted to be a scientist. I grew up on biology and zoology and had all these books. And my mother always indulged it and always said that I could be anything I wanted to be and put my mind to it. She's a very independent woman, as we all know, given what profession she's in, given when she started in the profession, telling me tales of her being sometimes the only woman in the room, sometimes being the only woman editor in the room, and the tales of do it, and bolstering that independence and the idea that I could make my own decisions and make my own thoughts, and I could make mistakes and how to learn from them. So she always taught me that, and then she always taught me that you could be whoever I want to be. So my other inspirations, women like Rachel Carson and Jane Goodall and Kristen McAuliffe, all these important STEM women, she gave me the tools to see because I still have the books and picture books and all these tales about that those women, that even if I'm not strictly going into science as much as I wanted to and focusing on policy and law, because I can't do research for the life of me, which is also a story that she has, that she originally wanted to go into chemistry. And both of us were like, no, we can't do lab work. We can't do lab work. We can't stay in the lab all day. We like interacting with people and history and that kind of work and changing the day by day. So she always inspired me and gave me the tools to find other women to inspire myself by. And I think the other thing about her is that the house I grew up in, she and my father were always in equal partnership. In fact, it was always strange. I would go to other kids' households and I'm like, oh, like they would be like, oh, so your mom is the one packing you your lunch. And I'm like, nope, mom doesn't pack lunch. Mom's doing the other work. Dad's packing lunch. It's the way they operated. For me growing up, the gender roles were very much more equal and flat. So it felt that I could do anything that I wanted to, and I can fluctuate and I can express myself however I want with however I was. So she inspired me and she led me to other women who are still inspiring me to this day. So I think that's the best thing a good inspiration can do. Not only inspire you yourself, but lead you to other women who can inspire you as well.
Yes, definitely. Susan Petroni?
I don't know how I can follow my daughter, but I'll try. My role models were mostly journalists. And I just think there's so many I could name, but I'll just name one that I can think of right now is Anita Martini. She's probably not well known for most people, but she was one of the first female journalists allowed in a locker room for Major League Baseball. And that happened in the 1970s. And when I don't know if most of you know this, but I started out my career as a sports reporter and a sports journalist. And even in the 1980s, I had a fight to get in the locker rooms. And most of the time they wouldn't even let me in. The idea of someone who was 20 or 21 years old in a locker room with young boys or young men was the idea that most coaches couldn't agree on. And so I just think back that I still had a fight for things that I thought were already advanced in my career. And another journalist I can think of is Nancy Maynard. She was the first African-American journalist to work at the New York Times, but what I found impressive is she ended up being the owner of the Oakland Tribune. And even today, the idea that women own news sites is very, very rare. The idea that women are journalists has become sort of common. The idea that women are editors has advanced, even though there are a lot of men editors that run newsrooms. But the idea that women actually own the newsrooms and make the decisions is something that is very, very rare in this country and even in the world. So I was inspired by a lot of journalists that paved the way for me.
Yes. I want to talk about those challenges, but first, State Representative Priscilla Souza.
So the woman who has inspired me, there have been many, but the one that inspires me the most is my maternal grandmother. And she's not surprised, she's not from Framingham, but she was a tremendous woman. She came from the northern part of the country to where I was ultimately born, where my mother was born, and raised 8 children there with very little education. And it started with getting active in local PTOs, local groups. All of a sudden, pretty soon she was campaigning for elected officials. My mom thinks it's really funny when I run for office, because even though we're in a different country, she's like, it all feels kind of the same because I grew up with this. My mother was incredibly politically active and she learned along the way. In fact, she was so much of a spitfire that she struggled with diabetes and ultimately had to have one of her legs amputated. And what does one person does after they get their legs amputated? They run for office, for city council, for an at-large seat in a city that is about 3 or 4 times population-wise the size of Framingham. So it is not a small city, and she had to do it from a motorized scooter, and she was a dynamo. If you go back to her neighborhood today, there's plenty of things that she is credited for, from like a wall to a noise reducing wall, back to where the train passes, to I think there's a park named after her. I'm hoping to get to see it very soon. But she basically built this entire life out of nothing and made the world a better place. She left the world a better place than she found it. And that's incredibly inspiring. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. I wish she was here to see. I think that in a year like last year when I was campaigning, I have no doubt in my mind that she would have gotten on the first flight here and probably driven the entire campaign team crazy. And like demanded that every debate be translated in Portuguese so she could give me her notes afterwards. So that was the kind of woman she was, but she was absolutely amazing. And even today, it's very common in our household, whenever I get a little saucier, for my mom to make a joke. She's like, well, she was known as Dona Chica. She was like, well, I guess the spirit of Dona Chica has descended upon us today, haven't we? Hasn't it? And that to me is the ultimate compliment. Those are the words that honor me so much, to know that even in my own way, I am carrying her legacy.
Thank you for sharing. Someone have to leave at 8:00. I don't remember. Jessica? Okay, Jessica, we'll start the next question with you. What are some challenges you faced while running for office or while holding office, and how did you overcome?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think really, I think there have been many challenges. I ran for office in 2019 is when I pulled papers, and I was sworn in on January 1st, 2020. And then March, the world shut down, and we were faced with incredible challenges on the school committee. The school environment was completely flipped. We heard the word unprecedented probably a million times, had a million meetings. And I was working full-time teaching, and I was parenting full-time at a 2-year-old. And anyone who's ever parented in a pandemic knows that there's a billion hours in the day. And I was fortunate that there was an hour or two that he would take a nap, and then he would emerge, the tiny destroyer he was. And it was hard. It was really hard. Balancing work, providing for as a solo parent, and being the sole caretaker of a toddler. Zoom helped a lot. It helps tremendously. and probably didn't really have the biggest village at the moment at that time. Since then, I think my village has expanded, and I'm grateful for the village that I have. And I would not be here today without them. And I always try to keep a positive mindset. I always think, you never know what's around the corner, and that's good things too. Good things too. But there have been times where sitters get COVID, or we've gotten COVID, or how do we get groceries if we can't go to the store? And it's just, I feel like going back to my mom, who, she battled having a child with disabilities, born with Down syndrome, and cancer again. And just going back to her mindset and having that mindset that if it's important, you find a way, and kind of carries me. And it carries me to this day, although I've gotten to a place where a 5-year-old is much easier to manage than a 2-year-old, working 2 jobs and with the household responsibilities. But yeah, I just feel like it's really having the right mindset. There are going to be challenges. There are always going to be challenges. And having a moral compass that is my North Star that's guiding me. And in the line of work that I'm in, it's really, when you are a mom or you're a teacher or you're, a community member or anything like that, with COVID in the pandemic, it was, if you always think about what is in the best interest of the child, the decision is always easy. There's politics, and there's different people's opinions, and this point of view and that point of view. But if you really have that mindset of you're doing what's best for the child, it's just a good way. You can sleep at night, and I feel confident in the decisions that we've had to make, and that the decisions that come before me, if you just kind of keep that as in the back of your head, why you're doing it. And like Janet said, like remembering like the why behind it, or maybe it was Jen, like the why, like what are we here for, and what's our goal? It's not for fame and fortune. We know that. It's for the kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Just letting you know you're doing a great job. Tracy?
Hi, okay. Yes, Jessica, I love that. There's so much that resonates. For me, the challenges for running for office were that, first of all, I had been trying to lessen my advocacy, my activism, and just a lot of things. I always seem to be overcommitted, right? And so there was a fire and in the neighborhood. And so there was a fundraiser for that. I went to that. I met Edgardo, who I knew of. My family knew him, he knew whatever. And John Stefanini was there too. And so I asked some questions or whatever. And he said, I perceive, he didn't say I perceive, he says, you're an advocate or something, like an activist, he said. I said, I'm a retired activist. He said, once an activist, always an activist, right? And then Edgardo suggested I run for school committee for District 9. I said, let me think about it. And in crossing, when I left the event, in crossing the complex, a young man who I had done a lot of children's activities. There was a lot to be done in my neighborhood. We had to take it back and clean it up and whatnot. There was a period way back, and I started a lot of committees, the children's committee, the this and that, whatever, a lot of things. And so this kid, one of our most let's say active children at the time, well, he was grown now, and he called me over. He's like, Miss Tracy, come over. Him and a father were sitting in the yard talking. and there were some kids playing. And so he's telling me now about teenagers these days, right? So what it did let me see is that it makes a difference. We make a difference in their lives. So they said I needed to get involved, and they did not know the conversation I'd had with Mr. Stefanini. And so I went home and I said, it's looking more likely. I felt like it was God. But then I tore everything in my knee. I tore things I didn't even know were in the knee, the ACL, the MCL, the meniscus, and I sprained 4 laterals, right? All in trying to recover more quickly from another injury. So I thought, this is difficult. This is very difficult. But like Priscilla's grandmother, I don't know if I was as feisty as her, but I said, how can I do that? I can't drive now. So now, I don't have a way or whatever. But a friend of mine, people kept insisting, yes, you can. Somebody asked my pastor if I was running. He's like, you better. But a friend of mine took me around, different people did. I didn't know much about campaigning and things like that. But honestly, it was the work from the past. I didn't know anything. I didn't even raise money. I said, people in my district don't have any money. I didn't raise money. So it was just Providence that got me there. I saw our need, and so I said, okay. And that's usually how I get involved in something. There's a need. And so I said, I know, okay, I need to do this for, that. And then, then as time went on, okay, someone else wanted to do the school committee part, and there was a need I felt on the city council. And so again, I dreamed of, going to Puerto Rico, but I ran instead. I learned as I went. You do learn as you go, I find. So things to overcome was having no experience with it. The physical challenge of not being able to walk, not having a vehicle at first. And then also just finding a way to make that space in where you're at, like when you have to speak up and challenge things or whatever, because it's uncomfortable sometimes. I like people, I get along with people. And just not having previous experience and learning as I go, and it was good though. So all of those were good. And I think that there's always more challenges to overcome, more to learn. Once I got in it, I'm always excited to learn more, which is why I got on the Planning and Zoning Committee. And that could take decades and decades, but I'm excited to learn.
Thank you, Tracy. Janet, what are some challenges that you faced and how did you overcome?
So I is somebody that really had no intention ever of running for office. Just I'm always behind the scenes, like I'll help people, and I'm more of a helper. I like to help fix things, solution, get it done. And then when we were part of the city charter, and then a bunch of people said, well, you should run for charter commission. And I'm like, oh God, no, and well, I did, and I won. And then we worked on this charter, and I kind of thought then when that was over, we walked away. And then a couple of years later, a lot of city councilors left after the first 2 years. And then there were all these openings, and everyone's like, you got us into this mess. You can help us now. I'm like, no. So I'm like, all right. So I ran, and my sister Karen ran for school committee. Together, we kind of were like the Crusaders. We're like, we'll go on and take on the world, girl. And, I have to say that, the campaign was, I think being misjudged, people prejudging you, thinking, well, you're, I've heard this, or, and it's like, if somebody I always give my cell phone to everyone. I'm like, just call me. I'll tell you anything you want to know. I'm really boring. Well, maybe not boring, but like, there's nothing, what you see is what you get. And I think that, to hearing Jessica, I always say, thank God we weren't on the school committee, because we were just counselors. What the school committee people had to deal with, I hats off to you guys, because you have to deal with the parents and the ever changing. I would not have been able to do that. I'm not gonna lie, that was the hardest thing, dealing with the parents and the ever-changing rules, and one day this and then the parents. I hats really off to you ladies, and the whole school committee, because I don't think I could have done that. That was like, city council was a piece of cake compared to that, because we just had the mask mandate, and we were, we didn't have to deal with, 20,000, however many kids, I don't even know, but so that was, I have to say, I think one of the challenges, one of the things is well, losing Karen during, that was the first tough part of, not kind of wanting to go on, and then having to fill her seat. And then we went through that whole, that kind of got a little heated there too. It's just, everything has to kind of turn into a something, but we kind of got through it. And, I, kind of moved on, go forward, and just, it wasn't as fun without, my sidekick, but, we have a good city council, and I think that we work well together. And I don't think we really have a lot of, I think the first term was a little more challenging with my first 2 years on the council. But I think that this is, this is my fourth year. And I think that we really work well together. I think we respect each other. And I think that we've been lucky that we don't have these issues that pop up that, we find ourselves bickering. So I think that's really good. And I think that the one challenge I think that I have the most problem with is trying to be everywhere. I always feel like I have to take everyone's call, email everybody, go drive by sites. And since I'm at large, and my kids are all grown now, I kind of probably have more time. So I need to kind of understand that I don't have to be everywhere every day, all day long. So that's sort of what I need to kind of find a better balance. But I have to say that I've been lucky. I think that we've been well received by the community, and as partners, Christine and Tracy, I think we get along well. And even if we may not have we may disagree on something, I think that we do a good job of not getting into these battles that we've seen before, and that we do see in other communities. So I think that we're lucky in that.
Thank you, Janet. I believe if your sidekick was here, she would be on this call, right?
Oh, she'd be right there, girl.
Thank you. Christine?
Yeah, your sidekick was my first treasurer.
That's right.
But so challenges to running for office. I've done this. I'm the oldest member here. So I've done this multiple times because I like punishment, apparently.
Yep.
So my daughter's saying, yep, you do.
What punishment? Checking in.
So, I mean, I've been running for office since
the Reagan era.
Yeah, no, since since the early late 90s, 2000 town meeting. And then I ran for selectman once in 2005, and then decided that wasn't my cup of tea anyhow. Ran for planning board, get elected to that 4 times in a row, I would say. And then city council, this is my second term, probably going into my third term, hopefully the end of this year, running again. I know, glutton for punishment. So I think the biggest challenges for me for running initially is getting your name out there and having to be everywhere. At that time, I was running my construction business. I'm a single mother. My daughter was 7 at the time, I believe, and bringing her to town meeting with me, having babysitting arrangements. And when you're out campaigning, you got to knock on doors. You got to go everywhere. So you have to get literature. You have to raise money. Time management is essential. So if you can't manage your time between your work, your business, and raising your kid, taking care of your family, and doing your politics, and that's a problem. So one of my skills is I'm really good with time management and with multitasking. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge for anybody to run, is getting your name out there, getting people to know who you are, getting your message out, and having a message, and getting yourself a good treasurer. That's always a plus. Connecting with the people that are going to be able to help you to successfully run a campaign. And you don't always want. There's been a few campaigns I've lost. Charter campaign, I lost by 8 votes. For city council, I lost by 8 votes. Same person, George King. anyway, so, but you got to persevere. So it's just an election. I don't take it personally. People vote, however that's one thing. When you are running for office, if you lose, get up and do it again. Don't be discouraged because you lose, because you could win the next time and the next time. So just because you have a loss, don't take it so personally. Voters vote for, sometimes voters just go down the ballot and check off boxes, or, you just got to work harder to get your message out if you do lose. But I would never tell anybody to not run for office, especially females, because our voices are really important, because we have our own perspective from a different, from our perspective of what we live and what we experience. And it's not the same as the male experience, no matter what. But I think it's important to bring in people with different backgrounds, different disciplines, different experiences, because that's what makes a city council or a school committee or a town meeting, planning board, whatever you're running for, or whatever office you're seeking. It's better to have a convergence of multiple different types of ideas and backgrounds coming together than everybody be monotone. And it's just like, oh, we all have the same idea. That does not make your community thrive, or it doesn't make for the best community. So I think for a community to really thrive and excel, you really need that diversity of opinions and diversity of whatever, however you identify yourself. But I just think that the more different voices you have, the better the community becomes. So those are the kind of challenges you're going to run into, but there's nothing that can't be overcome. It's just, you got to go out and do it. And it's hard work running for office. It's not easy unless you're unopposed. But, even when you're unopposed, that's because you've been beaten up so many times that eventually maybe you're unopposed. But I encourage people to run for office. It's good to have diversity. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you. So I didn't think getting elected was very difficult, because I was one of those unopposed people, which made it easier, but more difficult, because when I was in the position, the challenging part for me is there's so many pieces to learn between open meeting law, the policy, what your role is, how you're supposed to create that role, live in that role, what you can say, what you can't say, and all these pieces, and who you're supposed to be in touch with, who you're not supposed to be in touch with, all of these pieces. It's taken me 16 months now to kind of get my footing. And I think right now I'm, after the whole entire year, which, mind you, I've been an active parent for many years. I've watched school committee meetings. Watching it and doing the actual job are totally different. The thought that parents think that school committee has this role that you have the ability to change things. We have the ability to set things. We don't have the ability to, per se, change things. We have the ability to question things. But I think there's a very big misconception about what we can and can't do in our roles. And I'm still trying to figure it out 100%. And being that this role is only for 2 years, 2 years is not enough in this role at all, for any of these roles, being whether it's school committee, whether it's city council. And again, my opinion, 2 years is not enough, because it takes 2 years to learn, and then 2 years to put that learned abilities, skills, and information to work for our community.
Wow. Thank you. Isabella?
So I'm going to touch on something that I know Priscilla will touch on. Age, always a factor. In addition to being a woman, because it's not enough that you're a woman in a field, you're a young woman in a field. Young women, historically in a society, people love to, even if they don't directly go against them, it's very much, even if they don't confrontate them. It's very much a very passive aggressive of, are you sure about this? Like this kind of passive aggressive, like trying to leave it away around it. And I felt that a lot. I originally started before I got elected, founding the youth council, because I believe that youth had a voice in the same way that the Council on Aging had a voice. And I wrote up that piece of ordinance and presented it for the city council. And there was, some members were really excited about it, but others were like, well, you're only a 17-year-old, like, we're going to have to look this over because we're not sure about your intentions. Like, you can't be 100% sure how this works. There's all that kind of factor coming in. Even when we finally got the youth council, there was a lot of disconnects, particularly between what the youth council wanted and what the people we were representing wanted, and this kind of disconnect and understanding it. Because one of the things we initially passed, that we eventually got the city to pass, was the menstrual products ordinance. And we had to take a little bit of time to explain. So people are like, don't you mean feminine hygiene? And we're like, no. Older people, we have to explain this whole entire thing that like gender is more complex at this point. We have to explain all that about it. So there was very much, and then we would have to get stares and blank glances, and more like, well, why do you have to make this more complex than it is? Why do you young people have to make this more complex than it has to be? It used to be this way, and now it's this way, and we don't understand it. So there's very much that idea of not only this idea of being young, but also like your generation, or my generation and Priscilla's generation, have this different ways of understanding and growing up in the world, or more things were learned about the world than our parents or our grandparents' generations, which are mostly now occupying the positions of power. So it feels like not only do we have to advocate the positions we want to, but we feel like we have to be explaining to people that we're supposed to be constituting or supposed to know the kind of stuff. We see that all the time in Congress. Like, you have these older individuals and they're like, you're going through either like the recent TikTok thing that happened, or other climate change, or other gender policies, and you have to literally like explain it. And then as a woman, if you also try to explain it, then you turn into guys not understanding it and trying to explain back to you because you're a young woman who doesn't know anything any better. I think we haven't had too much of that directly, but there's a lot of times, sometimes I'll get out of the feeling, and I think Priscilla talked about this casual misogyny, that even if it wasn't directly misogynistic to your face, there's a little bit of, oh, they're not taking you seriously, they're mocking you, they think they can manipulate you, they can turn you around, like you don't know what they're talking about. And I think it's also something I see particularly about supporting other women, especially in the library. The current library trustees board is average age 65, 70, but that's not a majority of the people in Framingham's average age, but it's also not the average age of a lot of the new library staff and directors who are coming in. So sometimes, even though I'm on a board that's supposed to be also questioning the staff and just keeping the staff in check, sometimes I feel like I have to defend the staff because there's this feeling of the board that the board is like, oh, we've been on the board for 20 years, or we've done town meeting for 20 years. So you new library people who are in your 30s and 40s, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, we have to explain it. You're dumb. We know better.
Wow.
And you see this frustration that's happening between it. So sometimes you have to stand in solidarity, even with people you're technically supposed to be more monitoring after it, because there's that age solidarity that you have between it as being a young woman. And these can also happen not just from older men, but unfortunately also older women who sometimes got stuck in that mentality. And it sucks because I'm like, I don't want to fight against these older women who are like my forefathers or my foremothers, but at the same time, I'm like, they're not respecting me as a younger woman, and I can't have that. Like, we're supposed to be like, I'm not going to be basically a doormat and let it go, because I feel like to have this mutual respect and understanding and working with each other, we have to have mutual respect. And if you don't have mutual respect with me as a younger woman, then we don't have woman-woman solidarity here. We have you kind of repeating it and thinking you're my parents when you're not my parents, and you are my equal on the board that I'm on. So age is a huge factor in both explaining the problems you want to get done, but also like the seriousness of you, even to sometimes other women and other people who are older than you, who sometimes think of age as the sole defining factor and sometimes forget about, like, you were a young woman in this once. Like, remember that, because it's really important that you remember that we're all people struggling, we're all women struggling with the same thing. And, you know, you're a young woman too. Like, that kind of factor is there. So age is a huge thing about it.
Isabella, thank you. You said that with passion, and I can totally relate. I want us to talk a little bit about that. That's going to be the next question and the last question, a part of the last question, but we're going to move on to Susan and then Priscilla.
So obviously, I've not been elected to office, but I will talk about a little bit of
Yeah.
the struggles of being a woman journalist. I talked about this recently with NPR and GBH. I was laid off twice by the same company within 5 years. When I was laid off the second time by the same company, it was my fifth layoffs in my 4-decade career as a journalist. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon. Journalists are laid off repeatedly. I have friends who've been laid off 10, 12 times. And having been laid off that second time, I decided that I did not want to work for corporate media anymore. It is important for local media to have an impact in their own community. And when you think of the other news outlets that are currently in Framingham, they're based in New York and Virginia and someplace else in the United States. They're not based in Framingham. And I get told often, because I'm the reporter in the room, maybe you should write your story this way, says one man. Maybe you should, talk to this source. Maybe you should have done this. And part of me thinks that I'm told that because I'm the woman, because the men reporters, when they show up, don't get those same statements. I also find that I'm attacked more online than most male journalists. And if you look at just studies across the country, women journalists are attacked 3 times more than male journalists. It's just common. People feel the need that they can say something to you and think that you're not going to fight back. I am one of those ones who fights back. I do not put up with people telling me how to do my job. If it's another journalist making a suggestion, great. If it's someone making constructive criticism, great. But I don't need a man telling me how to do my job after I've been doing it for 4 decades.
Wow. Felt that. Thank you, Susan. Priscilla?
Where do I begin? And we have a lot of stories here. I mean, I'll build upon what Isabella said. It's really a matter of intersectional feminism sometimes, because you can be a woman, and yes, we have multiple women who are elected to office, but some of those challenges that a lot of us have faced is that we're not the right kind of women. We're occupying spaces where women have occupied, but maybe women that don't look like us, and still our otherness walks into the room before you do. Whether, it's because you're neurodivergent, maybe because of the color of your skin, maybe because of your ethnic heritage, maybe because of your age. I think that the funniest thing I've heard about me, as you're campaigning, you're doing things, your marital status, by the way, is also a huge issue. I have seen male counterparts who are unmarried run for office, and not once has their marital status comes up. If you're unmarried and running for office, oh my gosh, do you get asked, it becomes its own issue in the campaign. So I think the funniest thing I've heard about myself as I'm campaigning was last year, that I was quote unquote too pretty for the state house. I was almost a little disappointed when I won. I was like, I guess I'm not that pretty, but but it's one of it's those little things that you understand that it's challenging, because you may be a woman, which is challenging in itself, but you're not the right kind of woman. And I'm going to call it back to 2 things that I've heard here that's been mentioned. First of all, Janet, it's really funny that you said that you made that comparison with the school committee and the city council, because Councilor Cannon, who's here with us, I told him in February of 2020, like, this is going to be, at least I'm not on the council. I'm really excited about budget season, because school committee just gets to put all of our asks in, and you guys get to grab the scissors. So we're never going to be the bad guys. Then March 2020 happened. So, and then, being on the school committee became very, very challenging. But I did make that remark that, this is going to be a piece of cake. School committee is never the bad guy. But, and another part of it is also what Jessica and I, my vice chair, the school committee vice chair, and I went through during the pandemic. A lot of our meetings were through Zoom, and we were figuring things out on the fly. And we sometimes were sitting where we're sitting right now, but juggling multiple devices, because all of our materials are electronic. We were trying to manage tech glitches online, and sometimes that would require you kind of sending a quick text or a quick message to a colleague, and like especially in a situation like Jess, where she had Luca in the house with her. Hey, Luca's acting up, give me a second. And after every meeting, every single meeting, these meetings that lasted 4 hours, we would have to entertain a series of emails that our male counterparts were not receiving, our male colleagues were not receiving, about with comments from the public about how we have fallen short as school committee members because we didn't look focused enough, or we glanced off to the side, and it was being under a microscope. I was so relieved when we finally went to in person, because not having this little square on screen the entire time was liberating, because unfortunately this provided a vehicle for us to be under much more intense scrutiny than our male colleagues, and some of our other female colleagues who fit the profile, of a woman who they expected to be holding office. So intersectional advocacy, intersectional feminism is incredibly important, because you can be a woman and you can occupy a space that a woman has occupied, but perhaps you're not the right kind of woman, and that can make it very challenging.
Let's talk about the right kind of woman. This is going to be our last question, because we're going to wrap up. Actually, it's 2 questions. I'm going to ask you to choose one and make it brief. Make your answer brief. First question, I want to piggyback off of what both Priscilla and Isabella kind of talked about. Let's talk about female empowerment. For the future, what would you like female empowerment to really look like? That's one of the questions. Second question that you can choose to answer is, how can we empower young women, future voters, to participate in local government and community? So you can answer either one of those questions. Let's start with our youngest, not Priscilla, she's the prettiest. I'm sorry. Isabella.
So I'm going to handle the first question about how we can empower more female empowerment. And I'm going to quickly mention a brief story, because I think this is really relevant when we talk about female solidarity. So I don't know if any of you have been paying attention to the news for the past 2 weeks, but Wellesley College, the students recently took a non-binding agreement vote. Currently, at the moment, Wellesley College admitted women who are identified as women, trans women, and non-binary people who are assigned feminine at birth. So the vote at the moment was to include all non-binary people, regardless of what gender they were assigned at birth, and trans men. It was a non-binding agreement, but eventually it passed. Overwhelmingly, the student majority said that they wanted it. Currently, at the moment, they're fighting with the administration about it. And I think what it says about it is this kind of split between the old ways of feminism kind of beforehand and how we can move forward as a new ways of feminism. One of the arguments that they talked about was that Wellesley College and the Seven Sisters particularly were places for people who were marginalized as part of society. And at the time that those colleges were founded, we only believed 2 genders existed, and the gender you were born with was the one that you went through all your lives. But now it's been 100 years. That's not how it works as much anymore. And the students wanted to say that they were for marginalized genders. We want to reflect the student body to reflect marginalized genders. And hey, trans men and non-binary people have been at Wellesley College for centuries, because these are communities that welcome people of marginalized identities. And I think that's something that's really important and crucial to realize, is that all of us, regardless of all marginalized genders, are in this fight together as women, and as non-binary people, and as all walks of trans people, because all of us share this thought of we are not white cis men, and we did not grow up with the privileges that were part of it. And it's important that we share it together, because so much of the time that these white cis men were in power, all they want to do is just pit us against each other and fight against each other. And it's so disheartening. There's so much we can do. Like, the current thing with what's going on with J.K. Rowling is disheartening. I read Harry Potter when I was younger, but the fact that she is basically viewing trans women, people that I know, as not being woman, and saying that, like, this idea that they're pushing back feminism and feminism is being reversed 100 years is absolutely ridiculous. But that's women being put against women. And I think that's just important to remember in the future for female empowerment, is to include all people of marginalized genders, include all of them, because they all share this perspective and all share this part of it, especially in this time in our country when so many times these marginalized identities are being under attack. And sometimes they're under attack by women who initially were 100 years ago considered fighters, and then they kind of decided that other women who weren't like them were not willing or worthy to be part of it, even though we're all the same people in this fight. And I think that's really important about it, to accept that and include as many people in the fight for equality of gender for all, regardless of your race, regardless of your gender, regardless of your sexual orientation, regardless of your religion, your socioeconomic status. Like, we are all in this together. And the more that we divide among each other, as women, as people of marginalized genders, then we're just going to let the white cis men in power just win every time. Like, it's not pushing back feminism to include more people in the fight, because there are way more of us than them.
Okay. Thank you, Isabella. Tracy?
All right, so it's difficult to say which one, but I guess I'll take the first one. What would I like female empowerment to look like in the future? I would say I would like for us to be more honest across the boards, across the differences. It's funny that diversity and inclusion does actually go together. What I would like is for the established organizations, feminist organizations, which I think is happening on the grander scale to some extent, or we are learning to make it happen. I would like the established organizations, the establishment, to stop simply trying to recruit, and this goes for all organizations, recruit other women in, more diverse women in, to just support the agenda that they've already defined, or the old, what was the most important things back in feminism of the 60s, 70s, or 80s, but really to invite people in, but on an equal basis, being open to the fact that they come bringing also perhaps different priorities and whatnot, definitely different backgrounds, different stories. There is so much that is in common, but there's also differences, and perhaps you have to hear their feelings. I want all women in the future, female empowerment, to feel a unity, but also to feel that they're not just there to serve a pre-existing agenda, but that they're there to help create the agenda, have an equal voice. Our empowerment should be that rock solid, safe space for women to express, grow, and then together create and go forward in unity. But I think Isabella said a lot of it too, but we have to have real conversations, and we have to, when you open the gates and ask people to come in, they have to know that they're going to be treated equally. They're going to be heard equally too. So that's, I hope female empowerment leads the way throughout the world in showing men and how the best way to recruit, how to get it done.
Thank you, Tracy. Janet?
So basically, I agree with the last two, Tracy and Isabella, because it's like, I came on this tonight, we're like, okay, it sounds like fun, and none of us know what it's going to be about. We're like, is going to be questions? Is going to be, and I love all you guys, and I know all of you guys, and I just had no idea what to expect, and just putting a bunch of gals together, and you get to really learn something new about everyone. Like tonight, all these women I respect greatly, but there were sides to different people, and it's a stranger is somebody you just haven't become friends with, like when you become friends with somebody, all of a sudden they were a stranger before, and now all of a sudden this person has made your world better. And listening to everyone tonight and everyone's perspectives, I guess it really highlights, to your first question of how do we, empower women. And, it's as easy as being kind, it's as easy as being, helping, lifting others up makes you feel much more empowered, and it's a reaction you get. And I really learned a lot of that through my sister and her activism. And we were in the store yesterday with my mother, and there was a woman that we knew that she's a Framingham gal, and she grew up with 7 kids in Framingham, and it's a well-known family. And she said to my mother, I want to tell you that it was because of Karen that I graduated. I would not have graduated from FSU if it was not for Karen. So my mother starts crying. We're all crying. We're hogging the whole entrance at Stop and Shop at Old Connecticut Path, because it was just this, she felt it and said it. And Karen got this lady, this young girl, through Framingham State because they wouldn't let her, she was having issues. And Karen called the professors and it's like, right now, you stop. She's, she had some issues she was dealing with, and she now is opened her own. Well, she now has gone on as an advocate, and she does special needs kids. And I was blown away by it because I remembered part of the story, but it was a story that is that paying it forward piece. And it wasn't a big deal for Karen, and it's not a big deal for us to take others in and to try to, but empowerment and just by action of how, listening to people, like to what Tracy was saying, and to what Isabella, what you're saying is a younger, a kid. We still call you a kid because you're a college kid's ages. So we don't say it with disrespect. But it's true, because we can't disrespect by being submissive, we're ignoring you, or just, kind of like, oh, we don't know what you don't know yet. But you actually bring a voice that I think that we have to do a little better of really just listening, because when we listen, we really find out we pick up a lot and we learn more about ourselves too. So that's what I'd like to see carry on.
Thank you, Janet. Christine?
Thank you. So for me, recruitment is everything, because recruitment ends up being empowerment. So, and to the point of bringing in young people, that's what we need to do. So, because us older folk aren't going to be around forever, and we need to bring in and mentor new women into this clutch, into the political system, so that their voice is heard and carried on. So when our voices leave, you're going to carry this on. So I take a lot of time when I do meet people and talk to other people that have kids, or when I'm out campaigning, or just in general in the community, trying to find people to run, because it would be great to have more competitive races and to get people to run for office, because we need that. We need new people. I mean, things get stale when you have the same old, same old. So for me, I want to empower a new generation of women to come in and recruit. So I think that's what's really important, is to find new people and network and get, as I sucked my daughter into this at one point.
Thank you. Thanks for signing me up for town meeting when I was 18 years old and I was taking a nap.
Yeah. So, but we need young people to come in, because the only way you're going to get a good cross section of and representation of the city of Framingham is by having different generations participate in the conversation, no matter what committee or whether you're a city council, or whether you're on a committee or some other elected or appointed board. We really do need, and I wish people listen to this, we need people to come out and vote and to run for office, I should say. So
Yeah.
Especially women, get out there and don't think you can't do it, because you can. I'll say one perspective that I have, it's a little bit different than everybody else's here, because of the time when I first started running eons ago. Women were sought out for office because it was all men, and voters really wanted women to run because there were none. So keep that in mind. Voters do like women on the ballot, and look at how many women are on this ballot that are elected on this call.
Yeah.
So, and we have a lot of women throughout school committee, on the city council, and different boards that maybe aren't elected anymore, but I think it's really important. And voters, a lot of women make up the voting base. I think it's a majority of voters. So I would encourage women to get out there and run for office. And if you need help, call me, because you need someone to help you run. So anyway, that's my take on this.
Thank you, Christine. Jennifer?
Thanks. I think to empower women, I think women need to be accepted for who they are, not what they are. I want to be accepted for being a woman with a voice, a woman that has knowledge, a woman who can speak for herself, a woman who can lead. I don't want to be known because I have breasts.
Wow. Yes. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Preach, girl.
Susan?
I'm on Tracy. I didn't unmute. I want to start out and say that I want to take a little bit of what everybody said. I think it is important to bring more people into the conversation. And I'll start with my daughter for an example. She's not the only young voice in Framingham. There are tons of young voices in Framingham who I talk to every day. In fact, I spoke to one recently who wants to run for school committee possibly. But I think what happens is that people get lazy. And so when they think of a young voice, they go to my daughter. When they think of a Brazilian voice, they go to, Priscilla. When they think of an African-American voice, they're like, oh, Tracy. But there are so many people in our city and we don't include them all. And I think we all need to enlarge our circles. I think some of us have very small circles. And I think even in government, there's a very, very small circle and we need to enlarge it, include more of these voices. I spent some time today with the Youth Council. Some of them have been active on the Youth Council since my daughter started it in 2019. They have engaging voices, they have great opinions, and we need to include them. And I'm sure that all of us can think of some women that we know who are active, and we need to grab them along and bring them into the conversation and bring them into discussion so that they can be included in government. I think sometimes we engage with them, but we don't do the extra step of grabbing them along with us to the table. Yeah. And so it goes back to my point that I was saying, it's important to be at the table, but it's more important to have a voice at the table, and even better to bring somebody else who has a voice to the table with you. So
I like that. Yeah, I think that is one action we can all take away on this Zoom tonight, is to start bringing someone along, especially someone younger. Thank you, Susan. Priscilla?
Thank you. I'll try to keep it brief. So future empowerment, if it was up to me, is being in a space where us as women, and we represent, to Jen's point, we represent more than just being women. We're not, that's not all that we are. We are very proud of being women, but it's understanding. So a future that I would envision is a future where, and I'll go back to this expression, where our otherness doesn't walk into the room before we do, where our otherness doesn't have to occupy a seat next to us. We're just elected officials serving our community. I mean, I think every woman here has more than proved that their ability to make meaningful contributions to their community. However, there's a certain inefficiency when we're talking about representation matters. It's not just, oh, it's nice to have a woman at the table. We need to keep electing women so that it's no longer new, it's no longer trendy, it's no longer does a woman sitting at the table have to first preface all their remarks, all their contributions with a justification as to why they're there and prove themselves there. So that will be, empowerment will essentially be a very efficient way to run government when women don't have to explain themselves or justify how they got to those roles in a way that men don't have to do. So, and I'm very excited for a future where that is. And I think the way to do it, I'll echo the women who have said here, is to, once you get up on a step, you pull the next woman up. And one expression that we have to stop, I know a lot of women here on this call have heard it, but we have to interrupt, is wait your turn when it comes to women running for office.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that. Well, ladies, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Before we go, again, on behalf of the League of Women Voters in Framingham, we celebrate each and every one of you. We look forward to continue working with you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you to all of the members who are on the call. Thank you to our community. Thank you, Jake, for everything you do behind the scenes. And again, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful end of Women's History Month. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye.
Thank
And
you all.
Thank you, Cynthia, for having spearheaded this and putting it all together. Thank you all again on behalf of the league.
Thank
Bye.
Thanks,
Facilitated
Suze.
beautifully. Thank you all. And thank the league for its century of service. And this day, you guys are in keeping with what the League of Women Voters has done forever. And it's good to know that it's operating in Framingham too.
And you guys can join.
Yes.
Yes, join us.